Please welcome Jorge Fontanez.
I would like to begin with gratitude for the Taino peoples, whose ancestry I am a descendant of. The land of Boriquen, the indigenous name given to Puerto Rico, carries with it stories of generations of resilient people. My story and connection to my ancestors, like so many around the world and here in Canada, was disrupted. Today, I want to extend gratitude and respect for the Taino leader, Caguax, also the name of the ancestral town of my parents. Going back at least 400 years, my ancestors thrived on ceded territory for generations, despite imperialism and colonialism amidst genocide of other Taino villages in Puerto Rico. I only stand here in front of you today because of their resilience and honor the rewards generated by the land where my family thrived. I want to also take a moment and pay respects for the land on which we are convening, the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueams, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. It is an honor, thank you, to acknowledge this place and reaffirm our collective commitment to gather together. This means honoring the Holcomb and Homish-Snakem speaking peoples, excuse me if that didn't roll so well on my tongue, whose relatives and relations have stewarded this land since time immemorial. It also means taking responsibility for reconciliation and our relationship with this land as it stands today. We offer our immense gratitude to the original caretakers of this land, and in the spirit of collaboration, that their strength and resilience are why we get to be here together today. I'm fascinated with family history and genealogy. One of my favorite shows is Finding Your Roots, where celebrities get to learn about their ancestral history and use DNA testing to understand where their families come from. And often they walk away learning so much more than they ever expected or ever imagined. Before I share something personal, I just want to note that I've revealed that I sit solidly in that 45 plus demographic of television viewing. And so all of you B Corps who are interested in connecting with this demographic, feel free to sign me up. Sign me up. The story I often tell of my family's history starts in the 40s and 50s when they migrated from Puerto Rico to New York and to Philadelphia, displaced by economic policy that forcibly removed hundreds of thousands of people from land that would transition from agricultural to industrial at that time. There are the stories that get passed on, and then there are those that are lost, if not erased. And I recently learned that Caguas, as I mentioned in my land acknowledgement, where both of my parents were from, was in fact ceded territory. It was named after that Taino chieftain that I mentioned, Caguax. And he met Ponce de Leon in 1493 and decided that it was better to give over the land than to give up the lives of his people. So I'm fascinated by family history, I think not only because of my own curiosity and the time I've spent doing my own research, but also because I believe that history and legacy matter. And when history or legacy are threatened to forsake our culture, our history, and our connection to something bigger than ourselves, the likely response, a very human response, in fact, is to push back, to question, and even to fight, to resist. This is one of the messages that I'm bringing to you today as we embrace our evolution. After nearly 2 decades into B Lab's journey and the growth of our B Corp community, I want to honor our past, and I want to celebrate with you how we got to this point. And I also want to help us prepare for the future and what the future holds, and what joining the B Corp community, or what it means to be part of this community, what it will require of each of us moving forward. I'll give you the headline first. We are entering an era where I believe that individualism will fail. Only when we act in community will we see change. And so being an advocate for change as we embrace already with such care in this community will require us to keep our hearts open to work on letting go of our biases, but also our deep connections to change how we think, because we have deeply held beliefs that require us to revisit how we think, act, and work. My loving provocation to you, my B Corp community, is that the vision of an economically just, equitable, inclusive, and regenerative system means that we are committed to the end of human suffering. In the spirit of the theme of our conference, Restore, we're beginning with truth, with healing, with reconciliation in this community on this land. And I want us to explore how we can break the cycle of exploitative and extractive practice for generations to come. We are serving even more communities today that believe that businesses can be a force for good, right? That's why we're here. And despite the odds, B Corps, all of you here, continue to demonstrate every day that we are making progress and that we remember that resilience, respect, and rewards from the land keep us connected in this complex ecosystem that we call home. This year, we're building an offense. B Lab is here to serve you so that we might mobilize our community of nearly 2,500, I think we're celebrating that milestone today, by the way, in the United States and Canada, 2,500 companies, but the many more employees of those organizations to show that love and business are not contradictions. Labor, business, and city officials in the US and in Canada are already combining forces with climate and racial justice advocates to show the power of coalition building. We are not afraid. We're building a collective offense in support of purpose-driven business. And so at yesterday's CEO Forum, we tapped into the collective wisdom of about 160 of our B Corp CEOs and leaders who joined us so that we might explore how we can level this community up collectively so that we can face the headwinds that are in front of us together. And so here are some of the takeaways, some of the calls to actions that we walked away from yesterday's session saying we would commit to. First, we want to continue to lead from the front. This means advancing bold policy initiatives and not shying away from controversy. 2, we want to leverage the incredible amount of data in the form of stories that we already have as a community and centralize it. We're building a resource hub that you'll learn more about if you haven't already, so we can build our case through data together. 3rd, we want to look outside the B Corp community. Thankfully, here in Canada, we have many proof points, and while many of us from the US are feeling a whole host of emotions, including fear, we can look outside of the US for hope, knowing that in Canada, there are communities of people that are on the vanguard of what good governance and reconciliation can look like. And 4th, that we consider what we are uniquely positioned to speak on. Let me direct this to you. What are you uniquely positioned to speak on? Ask yourself this question. This is what our leaders are asking of themselves so that we can get to work and speak out and speak up. It's time to get to the front of the line. Getting to the front of the line means that we're centering racial equity, justice, healing, and reconciliation. Are you with me? Are we getting to the front of the line? Yeah? Okay. That was an invitation. Thank you to all of you that participated yesterday in the CEO Forum. I was in awe of that convening, and I know that those conversations will continue and the ideas will continue to ruminate. But when we center, the reason to center racial equity and healing and reconciliation is because there are also economic losses in the trillions of dollars every year due to racial bias, wage gaps, discrimination, turnover, all the things that actually prevent business from reaching their full potential. And this is the inequity that we want to address, that also further marginalizes peoples based on race, on gender, on sexual orientation, on disability, and on class. Widespread systems change is impossible unless we center equity. And so B Lab, we also have a responsibility to create more equitable access for those who have been systemically excluded from the B Corp movement. We are and have been investing and support Black and Indigenous founders who also identify as women or non-binary to actively level the playing field and reverse imbalances of power. As a majority white and white-founded movement, we must and are actively dismantling the delusion of white supremacy within our own systems. This is the call that Dr. Tiffany Jana made to us last year, right? Dr. Jana helped us imagine an Afrocentric future. And while we may not always get it right, we are committed to transparently sharing the wins, the setbacks, and the learnings of our own racial equity journey to inspire a better way forward. So we're modeling the change at B Lab in ourselves and with you in our community. And despite growing challenges, we are making progress in impactful ways that I want to share with you. Last year, we expanded our annual survey and we asked B Corps how they were implementing practices around racial equity. And we learned that a majority of you, in fact, are implementing at least one practice on what it means to become anti-racist. This to me is a signal that we're progressing on our journey. Most of you have implemented equitable hiring practices, about 70%. You've completed an assessment of your practices, about half of you. Or you've partnered with an external Jedi expert to craft policy change within your organization, about a third of you. Walk into any room today and about half of all B Corps are new to the movement. We are still benefiting from having doubled in size in just 3 years. And what that means is that as we grow, we must also retain our commitment to increasing representation and ensure that we are also focused on belonging. Good news. When we asked our BIPOC-owned and led companies to report their level of inclusion, 80% said they felt that belonging. And that was compared to the rest of the community, about 67%. So there's something going on here that we need to also understand about how the rest of us feel. The newly formed Be Proud Network that had an amazing event last night, I did not get to go to, I'm sorry for that, was created also in response to last year's survey findings that LGBTQIA and Two-Spirit owned and led companies felt less included in our community. And our team has supported its launch and advocacy efforts that have led to support and challenge anti-LGBTQIA legislation introduced in state legislatures in the United States. So last night, while I was not there, I know we celebrated Queer Joy with a drag show and drag queens hosted by Be Proud in a world where expressions of love, resilience, and unity have become even more precious. This is only the beginning, and we are a community in transition. There are pressures we're facing and navigating internally and externally that we should not ignore, and I want us to address them and invite us to continue to be in open communication and dialogue so that we can learn from each other. Our wellness journey is an intentional part of this strategy. One of the earliest insights we identified in my first year in this role was that B Corps, you all wanted us, B Lab, to model the change we want to see in the world. And so for us, wellness has become a priority, in fact. It's not just an individual goal, it's a critical business issue we want to address to build an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system. A new report, if you're not convinced, by Mercer found that 82% of employees are at risk of burnout this year, and only half of employers design work with well-being in mind. And this effect is magnified for female employees, those with caregiving responsibilities, for people of color, those that identify as LGBTQIA, those with disabilities. And we've seen this phenomenon within our own organization at B Lab U.S. in Canada. So we've begun experimenting with new models and offerings. We've implemented a sabbatical program for employees with tenure of more than 4 years. Most notably, many of you have heard, our 4-day workweek pilot was debated on, voted on, and unanimously adopted last summer. We'll be working We'll be working to implement that permanently very soon. We're studying ourselves. This is all to say that we're studying ourselves. We're putting a mirror up to ourselves so that we can understand how these offerings might actually improve the well-being of not only our team, but also how we serve you, our B Corp community. The results are that 93% of our team ranked work-life balance as the #1 factor contributing to their well-being. And today, we are also celebrating 100% retention and 0% turnover since the pilot was initiated. You will also be interested to know that we completed our own B Impact assessment last year for the first time. I have an unverified result, so please do not hold me to this. We have not sent this to analysts, but we achieved a score of 98.2. As we know that score is only as good as the things that we're doing right and all the things that we have yet to do, because we have a lot of gaps in the ways to improve. And so this is our opportunity to understand where are those ways that we can continue to invest so that we can continue to model what you all are already doing. Our theme of Restore is no accident. Imagine a community of B Corps emphasizing workplace well-being, changing the structure and the systems from within our organizations so that we can also see that resembled outside. We're in a moment where embracing our evolution is critical. Building and growing our trust with you and our credibility to serve this community is also on our top priority. 85% of you told us that certification is worth the effort and the costs. B Corp attrition remains low, about 6% last year, and overall satisfaction is at 71%. It's been pretty much at that level and stable since 2021, also reflected in our Net Promoter Score of 58 on average. But let me go a little bit deeper to tell you about what those numbers look like, because in Canada, there's a real high satisfaction rate. And so Michelle, you clearly are doing something that we need to model. Thank you for your leadership. There's no mistake that partnerships like the one we have with BDC help us deliver on our commitments and what we're here to do. Amongst network leaders, many of whom I got to see yesterday, our Net Promoter Score is a 74. You might remember that on average for the community it was 58. So we're taking specific investments and time with our network leaders to ensure that your experience with us continues to be strong. And we're grateful to see that our community team, led by Jody and Becca and Rose, who's on leave right now, thankfully caring for a child, and Carson, and we've grown our community team in a beautiful way to ensure that you can engage with us in good ways. And we're grateful that you have shared this with us. There's also great uncertainty and fear surrounding the B Corp movement. We're under growing pressure to increase the value proposition of B Corp certification while limiting the potential greenwashing that comes from certifying multinationals. Naturally, some B Corps are resisting changes. And so in response, we're creating more forums of dialogue. I hope that you'll look for our Q&As and all the ways in which we're looking to engage with you so that we can continue the dialogue and the conversation. Leadership in this moment means that facing such concerns and critique from B Corps is expected. And we're here for it. We're here to engage with you. Here's likely our biggest challenge, a data point that creates this uncertainty about the future of the B Corp movement. 25% of B Corps, 25% of you indicated to us that you might likely not meet all the requirements or express some of the requirements as inappropriate or impossible to achieve. B Corp activism will rise, and likely so will attrition rates, because no good movement grows without evolution and growth. I also want to assure you, though, that as we change, we are looking for ways to expand our offerings about how you can continue to engage with us and with the movement. In case you missed it, the second public consultation is still open through March of 26. So this is a crucial week, and we're grateful for our B Lab Global partners who've joined us over the next few days to connect with you about where the standards are going over the next few years. I want to also share back some of what you've all shared with us, which is that the requirements might be too stringent, the language might be academic, and also preventing many of us from fully participating and providing that feedback. And we've shared that feedback with the standards team so that we can ensure that we're working in a good way to ensure that maximum participation happens and that we have you understand what the requirements say. So we have an opportunity to move forward as a united front, and we want to know what that looks like. Many of you are engaged in focus groups. Some are helping with regional standards advisory groups. We're doing this because all voices, especially the most marginalized, must help shape the future of the movement. So submit your feedback. Either visit the Community Hub or take a look at the website, standards.bcorporation.net, and engage this week. We ask you to speak up to us so that we can inform the next generation of the standards. I'm wrapping up. I see the sign in the back. I actually don't know what it says because I can't see. But I see you, Colleen, and I'm wrapping up. It's important that we leave this week with some specific calls to action. The first is around coalition building. We're building the conditions for collective action, and we haven't fully unleashed our potential. Why? Because less than 10% of our community is led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so the first call to action is around our continued commitment to ensure that we're eliminating structural barriers that exist in and around our community. Over the next 3 years, B Lab will expand and scale our programs, starting with the Level program, in more deep and meaningful ways in partnership with our B Locals. We're looking at B Local Georgia, B Local Vancouver, and the newly formed group in Puerto Rico, Empresas B Información, who will likely help us understand how we can expand Level in local ways. Catalytic grant funding will help us get there, and the value proposition for our BIPAC-led companies must also shift to include investment opportunities to provide much needed capital and sustain their growth and ability to remain in our movement as well. And so our B Consultants program is readying for its third cohort, and you all will help us embed the necessary resources to support B Corps and our Level participants through the next evolution of our standards. Programs like our impact improvement programs, look out for our racial equity programs, learning journeys, climate finance. We're positioning ourselves for multi-year growth to improve the value that you receive from us, also scaling through tech-augmented solutions. We want to ensure that we're using our offerings not only to provide that value, but also to expand our circle of concern. So it's also true that it's likely that more of what B Lab is offering is not only made and created for and by B Corps, but also for prospective companies, so that we can begin to expand the impact that we're having with non-B Corps and embedding better business practices with more organizations so that we might accelerate the achievement of our vision. Lastly, managing change means that we have to ensure that we have good feedback loops. And so we've already pointed out the ways in which you can connect with us. I want to just say that because we're in this moment of transition, I recognize and our team recognize that change is hard. We're coming out of COVID, we're standing in between these two worlds, trying to navigate where we've come from and where we're going. And we're celebrating hard-won successes along the way. I hope you see that. Recognizing that we're also facing some hard truths about ourselves. And in order to get through this, we're one, finding more consistent and varied ways to listen to feedback, and two, going to continue to answer your questions about the future. Speaking of questions, I think this is likely the moment where we should transition in hopes of being able to answer questions, but there's also an opportunity for us to talk one-on-one. Over the next day and a half, I've reserved some time to be able to listen to you, answer questions, outside of our community hub. And so I want to turn it over to Vanessa next to see what we have time for. But thank you all for listening and for engaging in what it means to embrace our evolution.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jorge.
Are we done?